Back, do you want me to introduce you?
What?
Back your first It sounds like lavender. Sorry, I've been running all day. Can you sign me?
That smells really good. Is yours really good first? That's always fun to make with the kids. You know,
Oh, yeah.
They do like bath salts and stuff.
It's really easy to do.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
How's everybody doing? Thank you all for staying. I know this is the last session of the day, and anytime you see the word optional up there, you always kind of wonder what kind of attendance you're going to get. And I think 30 or something signed up, and that's about half. So that's not bad. You guys, what time did you guys get started today?
7:30. 5 o'clock. Yep.
5 a.m.?
Yeah. That's why I woke up.
Well, let me just mention a couple of quick things. I'm very, very into being punctual, so it's 4:45 to 5:45. I know you've had a fairly long day since 5 and so on, so I like to keep right on time. In fact, I'm always kind of irritated when you go to some concert or some event and they go, well, we're just going to wait a little longer till the people that get here, and all of us that got here on time are penalized. So I think we should start on time. We'll be done right at 5:45. So just a couple of quick reminders. The name of my presentation, I was telling Cindy and JL, is Gratitude Saving. It can save you too. I do this about once or twice a week. I'm extremely passionate about it. I recently just was reminded as I met Cindy, I'd worked over at Lowe's and managed that Lowe's store in just a mile or so from here, and then left and decided to do this full time, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So just so you know, you're in the right presentation here. So, and as I said, it'll be exactly an hour, and there will also be a couple of little exercises we'll do, very, very brief. So that, and then also cell phones, please make sure that those are on vibrate, or I don't know where I was the other day, it was something, there's always somebody that kind of forgets to turn them off, and they got all those different ringtones and that kind of thing. So, and then if you've got questions or you need to go to the bathroom or what have you, please feel free to head out, and don't worry about that. And then if you want to pop your hand up for a quick question, great. If not, you can save it till the end. So anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about me. First of all, my name is David Brooke. I kind of go by this handle, that gratitude guy. I've been doing this on and off for 5 or 6 years, but I've been very passionate about it for about 30 or 40. When I first started, when I was 19, I went and talked to a group of students at school, and the teacher had asked me to come back and talk to them the next year. And from that point on, which was 43, 44 years ago, I kind of got this bug about being a speaker. But I was never really sure what I was going to do or what I was going to speak about. I just knew it was going to be something that was going to be impactful. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is that it takes as long as it takes. And in my case, it took over 40 years to kind of figure out. I knew I was going to speak, I just didn't know what I was going to speak about. And gratitude came my way, if you will, through a gratitude journal, which I'll speak about in a minute. But what I really wanted to talk about is a little chunk of my life and how it kind of led me to this place. And understanding when you have a title that says Gratitude Save Me and it can save you too, you kind of think, okay, so what's he mean by saving? So one of the most impactful, well frankly, the most impactful day of my life was September 29th, 1998. And it was just a normal day that, it was a Tuesday, and I woke up and I looked over in bed and I couldn't find my wife. And I kind of went, that's funny, I wonder where Dana is. And Connor, my 4-year-old, comes running in and he goes, so where's Mom? And then I said, I don't know. And then Kyle was 14, comes in and goes, where's Mom too? We don't know. Let's go start looking. And so we looked down the hall, we looked upstairs, and then I ran down another hallway and looked downstairs and I saw her on the floor in front of the washer and dryer. And she was down, face down, and wasn't even moving. In fact, frankly, it looked like she was dead. So I ran down and turned her over, and there's stuff coming out of her mouth, and it was just not a pleasant scene. And I yelled at Connor and Kyle to go call the fire department, go call the medics and all those people. And within a few minutes, the house was just swarming with all sorts of police and fire people and medic people, and they had tubes and paddles, and Connor's screaming, what's going on with Mom, and he's only 4. And for those of you that have never been through anything like this, time loses all his perspective. And so I'm watching her, and I can't even control myself. I'm just like losing it myself. And again, Connor and Kyle are beside themselves. And again, time loses its perspective. It loses its value, if you will. And one of the people from the medic comes over to me, a young gal, and she says to me, we've been working on Dana for an hour and a half, and we have no heartbeat. You want us to continue? And even in a state of shock in something like that, your brain still computes and goes, oh my goodness, an hour and a half. And she was dead. And I found out later it was a prescription pill overdose that she died. They did these autopsies and things, and she had a problem with that. But to say that day changed my life would be an understatement. And I think along the way, when things like this happen, fortunately or unfortunately, as I look at groups from small to large, I always know there's a big chunk of the people that I'm looking at these faces that have been through similar things. And what it did for me is it got me to the point where I had to start thinking about, I got to find something. I didn't know if it was gratitude, I didn't know what it was back then. But prior to that was in September 29th of 98, prior to that, my whole life had been defined by death. And I kept thinking, I'm gonna have to figure out a way around this because it's just something that kept seeming to happen. And it was my two best friends and I who graduated from high school, big fiery crash from Dexter. I graduated from Queen Anne High School, a bunch more friends, 3 or 4 more friends in Vietnam. And then unfortunately my mother died of cancer, my folks had gotten divorced, my father committed suicide. He was a real highfalutin attorney downtown Seattle. My sister-in-law died, some more friends, my doctor died. And I remember thinking that at some point, again, when Connor was 4 and Kyle was 14, Dana was the day that she died, I remember thinking, well, boy, I'm gonna have to stick around to take care of these boys because they've already lost their mother, and so I better really find something. So as I kept looking further and further, I tried all sorts of things. I decided, well, maybe if, this is again prior to Dana's death, as these other deaths kept happening, that was the most pivotal. But I started thinking, well, maybe if I make a bunch of money, and I learned how to fix houses up and got a bunch of houses together, and I learned how to fly and on an airplane, and that wasn't the answer. And I kept thinking, well, then maybe if I go get some fancy job, maybe that'll be what it is. And I went and worked at Nordstrom and moved up, and in about, I think, 12, 13, 14 years, I had 7 promotions. I was a store manager, flying around the country in a corporate jet. That wasn't the answer. I started doing all these dangerous things. And then I thought, well, I better stick around. But I started bungee jumping and jumping out of airplanes and scuba diving and all these kind of things. And that wasn't the answer either. And eventually, I figured I'm going to have to get back to the point where I better just be grateful for the fact that I just have this body here, and then I get a good night's sleep, and I get to sleep in a bed, and I'm not homeless. I get to take a hot shower. But later I will tell you about what I found out, which is the gratitude journal part. And I think that people, what I noticed for me, and what I did not want to succumb to, is Dana, as I mentioned, died of a prescription pill overdose. It was Vicodin, and it was Oxycontin, and it was this unbelievable, and you just have the Whitney Houston deal, and then Heath Ledger a few years ago. It's just, people are looking for coping mechanisms. And I think they're also looking kind of for messages of hope in an extremely stressful world that we live in. And it's tough out there. You hear these words, the economy all the time, and people are talking about this and losing jobs, and things are happening. So how do we cope? And I think that, again, I started looking at different ways to do it, and I couldn't find one that really worked well until I really started embracing gratitude. And I realized I'm gonna have to be thankful for what I have. And again, with all these negative coping mechanisms, it's just tough what happens to people. And I read something the other day that I thought was interesting too. It was, I believe it was a book too, but they had the 5 regrets of the dying. And when people are dying all the time, you start thinking, and in my case, a lot of them had died much earlier than they should have. So I thought, well, what are they saying about these people? And they talked about, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And you think about how many times, again, I was mentioning to Cindy about working at Lowe's, and just ultimately, it just wasn't that's not my lot in life, to run one of those big boxes and sell hammers and nails. I wish I didn't work so hard, which I think is interesting because work so much of the time defines us in terms of how we are in our life. And somebody meets you and the first thing they say is, JL, nice to meet you, what do you do? And all of a sudden now we've been defined by, are you a rocket scientist, or do you drive a garbage truck, or what have you. I wish I'd expressed my feelings, which I think is a neat one too, because I think a lot of people never really say what's on their mind. And why don't they say, well, I didn't want to hurt their feelings, I didn't really want to say the real thing. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends, friends networks are really, really critical, and they've proven that over and over again that if you don't find your friends, or if you don't have as big a network of friends, you'll have a much shorter life and a much tougher time coping along the way. And then the last one, these people are all in their 80s and 90s that they did the survey from. I wish I had let myself be happier. And I find that's also interesting as well, because again, your happiness is going to be controlled by you. And what I noticed for me with gratitude is it kept getting into my life. It gave me a really good coping mechanism. And then as I say again, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, about a half hour, but it actually daily gratitude journal. And people have talked a lot about journals, but this is a gratitude journal, and it's very, very powerful in terms of what it can do in your mind too. So I'd like to do one quick thing. JL, could you grab those little 3x5 cards, and if each person could take a 3x5 card, and I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes for this, but I just want to get you focused on some of the things you're grateful for in your life. So on either side, whichever side you like, just write down as fast as you can in about 2 minutes, 10, 12, 15, whatever you can write down, things you're grateful for. And they don't have to be in a particular order. You can prioritize them later. But I want you to get into the mindset of thinking about some of these things that maybe you don't think about as much, and but you're very thankful and grateful for. So I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes. About 1 more minute. Okay, let's wrap up. There's always so many times that I've been sitting in those seats and been up front, and I always like to, this question is, would anybody like to share? And then everybody immediately doesn't make eye contact with it, just like when we were in math, and who wants to tell about the algebra lesson we just did. So would anybody like to just share what they had on their grateful things they are? Oh, you're all still looking at me, that's amazing. Yes. Thank you.
Time, family, friends, job, fresh air, safe home, husband, car, kids, parents, faith, responsibility, respect, Blossom, my dog, a comfortable bed, good health insurance, and a healthy heart.
Very nice. Very nice.
I was like,
Yes.
I'm grateful for the time I had with my parents and what they taught me. Grateful for my son, our health, what I have. Grateful for my family, friends, God, where I live, born in the USA, and what I've accomplished in my life.
Excellent. Oh, excellent. Very good. It's always neat. Who on this side? Yes.
I'm grateful for my body, my family, the world that I live in, my community, the beauty all around me, the abundance of life around me, and the diversity in this world.
Nice, nice. I like too the body too, because we don't have a body, if you don't have a brain that works right, it's gonna be really tough to be grateful for any other types of things. Cindy?
I think I might have been a little shallow on this.
Wait, there is no judgment here, none whatsoever.
I put motherhood, my girlfriends, my family, and my job.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else?
Okay. That was a challenge. I put children, family, good health, house, car, ability to learn, ability to pursue a degree, past experiences, good and bad, ability to travel, friendships, capability to work, the desire to make a difference, and the ability to help.
Very good. Those are all excellent. Great job. Thank you. Thank you for sharing too. One of the things that I use as an example about what you can accomplish too is that you can always, if you set your mind to it, you can follow through with anything, even in your darkest hour. And when I talk about September 29th, 98, that was clearly the toughest day of my life, and there were many others. But along the way, I thought I've got to get involved in gratitude, and it's been piece by piece. And again, being grateful for some of the very things you folks were just talking about. And again, just having a brain that works properly and a body that works properly, and that you get to have a house to reside in and not a tent or whatever. But I got involved in this gratitude book project, and they solicited a bunch of authors around the country. And I think there was, gosh, I don't know, several thousand, multiple thousands of entries. And I sent in tons of entries on the 2011 version, and I got one accepted, and that went on the Amazon bestseller list, which was really, really exciting, and that was Survival Gratitude, and it was for September 29th, and there's one story for each day of the year. And then this year it came out, and again, I got mine accepted, and that was May 16th, which is the day Connor was born, my 4-year-old, and it was the sweetest sound and the sweetest sight I've ever heard, and that one also went to bestseller too. So the whole idea being is that it doesn't matter what you want to accomplish, you can do it, but it starts with really getting grateful and dealing with what you have that is sort of your personal inventory. And I think in speaking of personal inventory, what I like to do, I like to talk about gratitude as a concept, but then we've also got to do a few things in our brains to kind of get ready for it. And one of the things I like to talk about is kind of clearing out some old tapes, for lack of a better term. So you've just seen, hopefully you all had at least a dozen or so items that you wrote down about things you're grateful for, and we tend to forget about it. Again, we live in this world where it's always, we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, or somebody doesn't have as much as we do. So what I like to do, I'm going to do another real quick exercise, and Dale, if you can pass out those pieces of paper. When we talk about clearing out our brain, you got to make room for good tapes and things that happened in the past, and things that are negative, and maybe that we weren't as grateful for, or should have been, or what have you, or different things that have happened can really, really make a difference. And so, but it's important to, like spring housekeeping, spring house cleaning, is to make room. So if you look at a red piece of paper, I was in a seminar last week and I said, what does green stand for? And the gentleman said money. And I went, well, that's pretty good too. But I was thinking green is go and red is stop. So this paper represents stop. So I want to talk about clearing out our brains for a few minutes. And the other nice advantage to red is not only is it stop, but your neighbor can't really see what you wrote, so you can write anything. So what I'd like to do, I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes, and we may do 1 or 2 other exercises, but that's going to be about it. But this is a big one. And this is, I would like you to write down everything that you're a little irritated with yourself about. I was going to say pissed, but that's not a very nice word. And that you're kind of irritated with, that happened to you in your life. I wish I hadn't done this. Why did I do this? Start writing them down. You can write as fast as you can. And I just want to make sure that we get this stuff cleared out. And it could be decisions you made. It could be some of the most personal stuff. Nobody's going to see it because you're on red paper. Now, at 62 years old, if it was me, I'd need like an hour for this. So, but I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes. So,
Well, I'm 65, I guess it's gonna take me 2 hours.
we're best friends already. I can tell.
It's a scary thought.
I know.
You know, and neither of you
I can't even
work
write
until
this.
you're in your 60s.
He's 66. In August.
Oh, it's-
Okay, about another minute. All right, so wrap up that last one. I love this exercise because you see several people that write 2 or 3 things, I'm good. And then you see other people like, I need more time. And for those of us that have been on the plan a little bit longer, man, but you know, you gotta learn to forgive yourself. You gotta bury those things, and whether you call them old tapes or things, mistakes we made. So this is one exercise I'll never ask anybody to share. Would you like to stand up and share what you did? I don't think so. So what happens in this situation is you've got things that, and I go through, every time I do this exercise, I've done it a lot myself with a paper. And I think about some of the mistakes I made and some of the judgments I did, and I think, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But you gotta put it in the rearview mirror, and if you've noticed too, on your car, you have this giant windshield that's in front, which you look forward. Have you ever noticed the size of the rearview mirror? It's about this big. You want to pay attention to the rearview mirror, learn from it, pay attention who's behind you. They're not coming up too fast, but really 90% of your focus should be on the forward motion and the windshield in front of you. So what needs to happen with these regrets, these mistakes, these questionable judgments or whatever it is, they need to be buried permanently. So what I'd like you to do is, in very brief, single file fashion, fold your paper in half, and then as only these things deserve in your past to be in your past permanently, is that you can take them straight back and get the straight line and put them in the shredder where they belong, which I personally brought from my home 63 miles away.
I said, why did he bring a shredder?
Well, you never know. So we can't talk though. This is like a funeral procession, so we have to be very respectful of these things that go down the drain.
All day long at home.
So, thank you all for giving those regrets and past indiscretions a proper burial. That's really where they belong. So, but I do want to talk a little bit more about if you're willing to change. And you, that means you, me, Cindy, JL, Tracy, myself, any one of you people. It doesn't matter. You is all of us. And I was thinking back about my experience in life where it just seems like a lot of people have a hard time changing. So if you think about what you're grateful for, if you think about what regrets you have, you need to get out of your brain and get it open to new thinking and being forward, and think about all the good things you can do going forward and not the mistakes you made in the past. Gratitude has a lot of room in there, and it can really, really help you. And then when I wrap up with the gratitude journal, it is amazing how that will manifest itself on a daily basis and how it will change it just by taking 7.5 minutes a day and writing. But when Dana had died, prior to that, she had been hooked on painkillers. And she was 38 years old, tall, very, very good shape. Our first date was running Green Lake down in Seattle, so certainly nothing I expected along this line. And then I get a call one day, and she's been arrested for prescription fraud. And again, I don't know about you, but I've never been really in jail, and here's somebody like this, and their hands are cuffed, and I just, well, this must be April Fool's Day, but it wasn't. And she'd been taking the little pads and been stealing them and then filling them out and taking them to the doctor. So then she was in treatment for 3 different times at Providence, Everett. So I forget which time it was. Well, I think it was maybe the 3rd one. This Dr. Dickinson comes in and he tells me, so you're David Brooke, you're Dana's husband, yeah. I need to talk to you, and I need you to know what you're up against. And so he points over to a room that's got about 25, 30 people. They're all addicts, doctors, lawyers, didn't matter what it was. And they've all got the same problem. And he said, I need to make it very clear to you what the odds are. And whether she's 38 or 68, it doesn't matter. He said 1 in 20 will make it back to a real life. And of the 19 that don't, about half of them will die. And it was about 6 months later was when she died. So I never forgot that. And I started thinking, so it doesn't matter how many people I speak to, small group, large group. I always think, are those odds, are you gonna be the one, or are you gonna be one of the 19 that are gonna change? And whatever it might be, anything in your life. And it's tough to change, there's no question about it. But it reminded me of a story of a young lady that was working for me when I had left Nordstrom and I started my own business. And it was an auto detail business, and I really wanted to build into a big chain. And I was doing really well, and this gal came to work there, and I think she had kind of a tough past. Perhaps she may have been abused, or she might have been a stripper or something. I just felt bad for her. She was in her early 20s. And, but she really seemed like she wanted to make something of herself. And so then she informs me one day that she's pregnant, and it's one of the guys at the shop. And I thought, gosh, you know, Tracy. That was actually her name. And so she said, well, here's what I'm gonna do. You keep talking, I'm always preaching this. And she said, you talk about being 1 out of 20. I'm gonna be the 1 out of 20. I'm just telling you, I will be the one. And don't give me this, I'm gonna start the 19, I'm gonna clean up my act. She goes, what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna have an abortion, I'm gonna have this baby, I'm gonna go, this is in Seattle, I'm gonna move to Texas, where my mom is, I'm gonna go down there, I'm gonna have the baby, I'm gonna completely change it, you will be so proud of me. I said, okay. So off she left and gave her a hug, and she went down to Texas, and it was 6 months or a year later, and frankly, I'd forgotten about her. And I get a call one day, and it's Tracy. David, this is Tracy, and I kind of think about it first. Oh, Tracy, right. She goes, I just want you to know I did exactly what I told you I was going to do. Down in Texas, you know, I'm not the 19, I'm the one. I just want you to know that. So, well, tell me what happened. Well, I had my baby. Great, fantastic. Little boy, perfect. What's his name? Robert. Great. She goes, and I met a new guy. Completely turned it around, so this is fantastic. So what's his name? His name is John. Great. She goes, I'm just in love. Everything's fantastic. Well, what does John do? Well, he's on work release right now.
Sweet.
And I still remember that day on the phone, just kind of going, you know, goodness gracious, you know. So I did get some checkup on her a year or so later, and things had gotten better. But it's such a challenge. And I think that the other thing that I want to make sure that I always communicate is that, as I mentioned earlier, I started this dream sitting in a classroom about this size for Mr. Crum speaking, and I was 19, as I said, and I was just graduated from high school, and I was in college at the U the next year, and I was talking to a bunch of students, and I couldn't even, my mouth was dry, it was just, but I kept thinking, I want to do this, I want to communicate this to people. I didn't know it was going to be gratitude, I didn't know what it was going to be, but I just knew I wanted to spread a message, and I wanted to make sure there was a reason why I was here. So, but I remember thinking later, it's difficult, and that's why I make such a big deal about gratitude. If you have a vehicle that works for you, and again, I'll talk about it in a few minutes about how it can change you, but it takes as long as it takes, and that's something else. You know, I'm 62 years old. I'm sure I'm the oldest person in the room. I think that's a mistake. And everywhere I go, I'm the oldest person in the room. And so I tell people, that was 43 years ago that I was talking about this, and here I am. And I had to go through all this. I had all those promotions at Nordstrom, and that wasn't the answers I mentioned. I started my business, and Dana died, and all these things happened. And I think I'm going to do my best work in the next 10 or 20 years, and I'm not going to stop. You know, I'm going to go 72, 82, 92, whatever the good Lord allows me. But I'm going to spread this message. And the point is that it takes as long as it takes. And it's so important as I look at each one of you individuals. So there's no men here, it's all women, isn't it? But look at each one of you women. And it doesn't matter what your path is or what your past has been, you can start today and it can change it. And again, I'll mention the journal in a second. But it doesn't seem to make any difference. And I've noticed so many cases in my life where it's made such a big difference that I didn't give up, that I didn't forget to see that huge windshield in front of me and pay too much attention to the rearview mirror, hence shredding all those tapes from the past and those regrets and mistakes. And I think about Connor. Connor he just called me when I was in the other room, just writing in my journal, as a matter of fact. And when he was 4, Dana had died, and he struggled athletically. And I was a pretty good athlete in my time, and so it's always practice, practice, practice. But Connor just had the worst time, and he couldn't hit, he couldn't run, he couldn't throw, he couldn't, you know, it was tough. And I'd watch him play baseball, and he'd go walk into the dugout, and he'd put his face in the dugout and start crying, and, you know, trying to be a good parent. I'm sure many of you are parents here. you can't run down there and give him a big hug and tell the coach it's gonna be okay, so you just live through it. So he struggled and struggled and struggled, but he kept trying. And eventually, I remember I had gone to, when he was 5, he had struggled so much when Dana had died. I held him back in first grade, so he went to first grade twice, and he was just having a terrible time. And Cindy, you and I talked about kids that struggle, of course, you know, so it's just, you're trying to make the best decisions for them. So they went and did this assessment, and they said, we need you all day long, something's wrong with your son. And I've already gone through the thing with Dana, and Kyle, my 14-year-old, was having a very difficult time as well. So they do this assessment all day long, and at the end, I sit down and she says, we need to go through all this. Here's gross motor, fine motor, all these different things that were not right with Connor. And so I was very emotional, very, very tough, because it had only been, I think, 6 months earlier that.
How old was he at this point?
5, yeah, maybe 5, 5 and a half. And even 6, it's funny how it's foggy. But what I remember the most is the very final thing she said to me, and I said, we were living by Green Lake in Seattle, and I said, well, you know, you can say all you want about Connor, but I'm just telling you that he's gonna be the starting quarterback of Roseville High School. I'm just telling you. And she takes a breath and she looks at me and she goes, he is not gonna be any quarterback at any school at any time, ever.
Oh.
And I started crying. I'm a pretty emotional person already, but I got in the car and I'm just bawling as I drive home and so forth. And I remember thinking, man, you know, you just can't give up, Dave. You got Dana's gone, and you have to keep going through these things, and it's okay. You just don't ever take your eye off looking forward. So, flash forward, he's having a tough time in baseball. Maybe she's right, but he never gave up. And on May 31st, 2006, we were living in Kirkland, a little apartment, and he was playing baseball. And he got a little better, but he was still really struggling. And we had the ultimate situation comes up. It's 7 inning game, it's the bottom of the 7th. His team is behind 7-6. Guys are on second and third, and he's a bat, there's 2 out. And he comes walking up, and I'm just sitting there, oh, good Lord. And I almost couldn't talk just at the prospect of what was gonna happen. So he swings, doesn't even come close. He misses the ball by a foot. And then there's a ball, and another ball, then a strike, and then another ball, and it's a full count. I can remember this like 5 minutes ago. And the next pitch, he rips down the third baseline inside the bag. The guy from third comes around and scores. The ball comes in from left field. The guy slides under the tag, and he's safe, and they win 8-7. And he's standing out on second base, and the whole team goes out and gets him and puts him on his shoulders and carries him back to the dugout. And I can't tell that story. It's 7 or 8 years ago now. Every time without still getting choked up, because the conversation that he and I had that night was not about baseball. It was about the fact he never gave up, and whether it was seeing what happened to Dana or whatever had happened to, and this lady telling him he's not going to be a quarterback, and he never gave up. And the neat thing about it is today when he called me on his baseball team at Bothell High School, he's a starting pitcher now.
Did you call the lady and be like, oh, by the way, I'd like to invite you to baseball? I would have.
Cindy, that's a great point, but I wrote it on my red piece of paper that got shredded. And, so I don't have the number anymore. And so otherwise I would have had. But I think it's so important. There was a great, for those of you that haven't watched it, it's hopefully maybe a few of you have. Steve Jobs unfortunately passed away about 6 months ago, and he did a great commencement speech in 2005 at Stanford. And it's the first thing that comes up on YouTube, Steve Jobs' commencement speech. It's 14.8 minutes long, and it's basically 5 minutes on his being adopted and growing up, 5 minutes on Apple, and then 5 minutes on cancer. And he says in there, I beat cancer, and unfortunately he ultimately didn't. But he says something that's so powerful in the middle, and he goes, you can connect the dots of your life backwards, but you cannot connect them forwards. So you don't get to know what's going to happen out in 2015 and 18 and all these things, but I can look back and think about that gal that I would like to find out if I had shredded her number. I was so upset. And that's why those things happen, and that's what happens, and it can, and it really can. And that's why I really make a big deal about being 62, is it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, and again, I think personally for me, with everything that I've been through, I don't care. I'm going to make a big difference. I'm going to communicate that I've walked down very, very similar shoes. We cannot walk in each other's shoes, but we can walk down similar paths. And I've listened to a lot of people, I've sat there and listened to people here that were great, but they were kind of talking out of the book. And this is what I know, this is what I've learned, and so on. But when you've had a similar experience, it makes a huge, huge difference. And so I have a number of other stories that I'm going to keep it short today because we only have an hour. And again, I want to honor us by being done at 5:45. But what I'd really like to talk about is this gratitude journal. And I think that what had happened is a friend of mine says, well, Dave, you're kind of understanding gratitude. You need to get a gratitude journal. And I said, well, what's a gratitude? Isn't it just a journal? I mean, everybody says you should keep a journal, which is a great idea. But this was different. This was a gratitude journal. So I bought one. I got it on Amazon and I started writing in it. And all of a sudden, all these really neat things started happening. And I'll say this is mine. I'll tell you about this in a second. But just as a brief explanation, gratitude now, this is everything you're grateful for today. Your gratitude intention is everything you're going to be grateful for tomorrow. Almost spoken in the present tense, like I'm so grateful for how phenomenal I'm going to do at college or whatever, get that job that maybe you're looking for, whatever the example might be.